And welcome to Counsel of the Day with Shanrae. And I am Shanrae. All right, this is our last and final night for this quarter, the second quarter of 2022. And I mean, this month has gone by so quickly. So this week, our subtopic was early exposure to sex and relationships. And so, I am a degree counselor. I acquired my degrees from Ashford University, and I'm a Christian counselor. This is an open forum. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask questions. I will pause and I will address the questions and answer them to the best of my knowledge. Or if you have any life situations that you don't mind sharing, I will address those as well, bring light to it. All right, so let's go on and get started because this is a 30-minute platform. Sometimes it runs a little bit over, but I'm gonna go on and get started. I'm gonna open this up just a little bit more for you. So again, like I said, I am a degree counselor who've acquired my degrees from Ashford University, a dual degree, and bachelor's of science degree. So I have psychology and organizational management, and I acquired them from Ashford University. My great passion is bringing healing to people who have been through a traumatic and stressful experience. And when human beings experience trauma or severe life stressors, it is not uncommon for their lives to feel like it's unraveling. So I help my clients that I help include couples, children, adults, and families to find healthy perceptions of themselves and to help them strengthen their relationships so they can know themselves as peaceful, complete, whole and safe. All right, so let's move this along. My website disclaimer. Let me read this very quickly. Please be aware that due to the nature of the technology that I'm using, there can be no assurance of confidentiality when using this online service. Should also be noted that due to changes in policies, that all replies are to be used as advisory and informational only and will not constitute an official determination. Information provided by myself, another counselor, other counselors, other counseling services are subject to the limitations of the current and the available material. But the final responsibility for successfully achieving a goal rests with you, the individual. Information online is designed to be helpful. However, this information does change frequently, and it is recommended that you, the individual, will consult another physician, another specialist, and or religious leader that will aid you in your overall behavioral wellness. Okay, so we've got a lot going on this evening, and I want to try to get through everything because any and everything in life is relational. It doesn't matter if it's a coworker, if it's a spiritual, like a pastor, and you a parishioner type of relationship, mama, family, friends. Everything in life is relational. All right, so I am a Christian counselor, like I stated earlier, and my scripture for the month has come from Luke chapter 12, verses 48. And it says that for everyone to whom much is given, of him shall much be required. And this comes from the amplified version of the Bible. So let's move on now to, we're talking about early exposure to sex and relationships. Let's move on to our definitions. that I chose because they have a variety of definitions, but these are the ones that I chose. Number one, for exposure, it says the state of being exposed to contact or in contact with something. And then for sex, the definition that I chose says it's chiefly with reference to people, sexual activity, including specifically sexual intercourse. All right, so let's move this along. Tonight's key points, it's a lot of them on tonight. So I'm going to be talking about sex and our psychological needs, why our emotions determine our sexual behavior and not the other way around, psychological needs and strategies. Sex is a strategy that we use to meet our psychological needs and not a need itself. Is sex good for us? What does the science say about that? Men and women's differing needs, meeting your psychological needs, sex, attachment, and our psychological needs. Sex is about emotional needs, psychological needs. Married to a sex addict, and then our takeaway. So that is a lot, but we're going to get through it. We are going to get through it. And again, feel free to ask questions. This is an open forum. So if you have any questions or any scenarios, feel free to put in the comment section. I'm working different devices, so I'm going to be looking up and down. I want to make sure that I don't miss anything and that I can answer your questions. I think I'm going to try to put my phone up here a little bit. I'm going to try to, so I don't have to look down as much tonight. All right. So early exposure to sex. Let's break this down just a little bit. And it says an early exposure to sex might interfere in the process of a healthy individual, which will result, reasoning, which with all reasoning, and I don't know what is going on with this and why I don't have my definition. Excuse me, because I should not be struggling. Let me move this along. Early exposure to sex. Let's talk about our psychological needs. All right. So these are biological requirements for human survival. Example, air, food, drink, shelter, clothing, warmth, sex, sleep. These are all our biological requirements for human survival. And if these needs are not satisfied, the human body cannot function optimally at an optimal level. All right, so we're going to move on to sex and our psychological needs. Now, this is a theory that I researched, and this theory is by Dr. Mark Manson. This is evidence-based, and he talks about sex and our psychological needs. He said why our emotions determine our sexual behavior and not the other way around. Why our emotions determine our sexual behavior and not the other way around. So he says that there's a fundamental assumption a lot of us make about sex that often causes a lot of skewed perceptions about why we're not getting the sex / love that we want. And so he breaks it down, and let me open this up a little bit. He breaks it down. He says men have a tendency to make the assumption that sex itself is a need, regardless of who or what it comes from. Women have a tendency to assume that sex can only be a form of intimacy or love. But both of these are wrong, and they both get a lot of people into a lot of trouble, especially in relationships. So he says he's going to explain this. All right. So let's break this down to psychological needs and strategies. All right, and so I'm going to and let me see if you announced yourself, I want to say hello. If not, it's okay. So he breaks this down. Psychological needs and strategies. All right. So it says that all humans possess fundamental psychological needs. And if we do not meet our psychological needs, we suffer, sometimes severely. So just like we need food, we need shelter and sleep to survive, we also need to fulfill our psychological needs to remain mentally healthy and stable. I'm going to say that again. We also need to fulfill our psychological needs to remain mentally healthy and stable. Psychologists have studied a number of psychological needs, but they started narrowing them down into 4 fundamental needs. So let me tell you what the 4 fundamental needs are, and hopefully you can see them. Number 1 is security. And we know, especially us adults, we know we have to have security. Number 2 is self-esteem. We have to have self-esteem in order to function at an optimal level. Autonomy. And let me define what autonomy is. It's the capacity of an agent to act in accordance with objective morality rather than under the influence of desires. Okay, so it's more of a moral type of act rather than instinctual. Okay, and connection. So the 4 things again that Dr. Mark was talking about, saying these doctors found we need 4 different things to meet our psychological needs: security, self-esteem, autonomy, and then connection. All right. So to be happy, stable people, we need to meet all 4 of these needs consistently. And if we're not meeting these needs, then our minds will actually begin to rationalize ways to get them met. Okay? Okay, let me move over here. Okay? Your mind starts to rationalize ways to get what you need. Okay? And to get what you need met. All right? So, and if we're not meeting these needs again, our mind starts to rationalize, and even at the expense of our physical and our mental health. People will try to find ways to find security. They'll try to find a way to self-esteem. They'll try to find autonomy, and they'll try to find connection, even if it's being connected to the wrong type of people. History and theory have proven that a lot of young boys, a lot of young minority young men joined a lot of gangs for the connectivity, to be a part of something, for a form of a family. And so and in these gangs that they joined up with, it's not like they're healthy or they're doing good. These gangs, they're hurting people, but they joined up because it was more like a family, a connection. Okay, so that's what the doctors were talking about, where if certain needs are not met, our minds will begin to try to rationalize ways to get whatever need that you're missing met. So if one is never able to meet their needs, like for self-esteem, they'll become chronically depressed, and sometimes they'll commit suicide. If someone else meets their needs for autonomy, they will fall into a state of codependence or learned helplessness. Y'all know we talked about that week 2 and went into some of it week 3. Again, if one person never meets their need for autonomy, they will fall into a state of codependence or learned helplessness. So, on top of psychological needs, we have psychological and social strategies that meet these needs. Sometimes these strategies are more abstract, dealing with ideas rather than events. Okay, and some are obvious. For instance, and I'm going to turn because here we go. Sports fulfill our needs for connection. A lot of this, when most young men or women that play sports, there's a strong connection there with their team members, and if they win, it also helps their self-esteem. Okay, so a healthy family unit can provide for our needs of connection, self-esteem, and security. Learning martial arts, for example, can fulfill our needs for security as well as self-esteem. Getting good at math to impress our teacher can fulfill our need for self-esteem. And another example is experimenting with drugs, which is not a very positive example, but experimenting with drugs can fulfill people's needs for autonomy and connection, and so on and so on and so on. So Dr. Mark says, here's the doozy. He says sex is a strategy that people use to meet their psychological needs and not a need itself. All right, so let me move this along. Sex is a strategy that people use to, he said, we use to meet our psychological needs and not a need itself. So, how do we know this? Okay, Dr. Mark says because there is no evidence that celibacy or asexuality is actually physically or psychologically unhealthy. So you don't die from not having enough sex. In fact, He says, in fact, there are many health risks because of sex. Well, we know because of irresponsible sex. There are many health risks because of irresponsible sex. Okay. And one could even argue that there are psychological and health benefits from not having sex. All right. So, um, let's talk about, is sex good for us, and what does the science say? All right. Is sex good? And this is, again, this theory, this study is by Dr. Mark Manson. All right. And this is evidence based. Okay. So, is sex good for us? What does the science say? Let me open this up so y'all can see this. Let me move. I'm sorry. Let me go back. I must have moved it too fast. Ooh, I did move it too fast. Okay. Is sex good for us? What am I doing here? All right. It says sex is great for reproduction and the propagation of the human race, obviously, right? Okay. It also increases emotional attachment to your partner, which is good for life satisfaction, emotional well-being, and child rearing, of course. It also brings various health benefits. Example, a lower blood pressure, a higher immune system, lower risk of heart attack, lower risk of prostate cancer. And then he also says something else. He said it's, you know what, it's effing fun. That's what he says. But he also says, let's approach this with precaution. And this is Dr. Mark Manson. He said, approaching it with caution. And let me see. First of all, he said, for the flip side of propagating the human race, he said, we're talking about sometimes there are unwanted pregnancies. Sometimes there's risk of catching STDs. Ejaculation weakens men's sperm, and that is a medical fact. Ironically, the more sex that a person has, the less likely they're to conceive. So slow down there. He said, slow down. Sex doesn't only bring health benefits; it also comes with certain risks. For example, some people have gotten prostate cancer. Some men have gotten prostate cancer. But these men also had a history of sexually transmitted infections, and more so than healthier people. So Dr. Mark said he's simply pointing out that it's not a biological, psychological need, but rather simply another drive, right? And so, on the other hand, he said now he's not saying that we shouldn't have sex. He said he's the last one that will argue that, and I am too. Okay, so in fact, sex is great. Sex is awesome. Sex makes us happier and healthier people. And he said he's simply pointing out that it's not a biological, psychological need, but rather simply another drive. And I said that again. So, on the other hand, if psychological needs go unmet for long periods of time, it will absolutely, he says, F up physically and F you up physically and psychological. This is what Dr. Mark says. All right. So people develop neurosis, addictions, and even delusions to get their needs met. Research shows that social isolation is more harmful than alcoholism or smoking. Depression and stress are related with all sorts of terrible physical issues. No one ever killed themselves because they were too horny. Okay, this is what Dr. Mark says. No one has ever killed themselves because they're too horny. They do it because of lack of connection or lack of self-esteem. So the idea of sex as a strategy to meet psychological needs sounds very weird to a lot of people, because sex is also a physiological drive, like eating or sleeping. But unlike eating or sleeping, he said you can go your whole life without sex and not be any worse off for it. And there are some people like certain monks and people that take and Catholics, nuns, they take a vow of celibacy. So the fact is, as humans, we've actually evolved to use sex to meet our psychological needs, not our physical needs. So let's move this on. The next thing he's asking, Men and women, or he's talking about his research described men and women's different needs. So much of the mismatch understanding between men and women and sex comes from the fact that men and women usually use sex to satisfy different needs. Traditionally, a woman's best route to a secure future, and then he said traditionally, and this is okay. Traditionally, a woman's best route to secure a future and healthy children through was through marrying a successful man. And that was in the past. All right. So women mainly sought sex out as a form of security. That was back in the day. Okay. Even today, he said there is still a lot of appeal in a man who can provide a secure, stable environment for a woman. That's in some instances. We've come a long way, baby. Women are very, very, very independent. We have come a long way. All right. So then he said his findings was women have also suffered a history of having their sexuality shamed and suppressed by society. Therefore, many of them have come to feel an inverse relationship between sex and their need for esteem. Instead, they are far more likely to use sex to seek out their need for connection, since they've been conditioned to feel bad about themselves for having sex for some whatever reason. Men, on the other hand, have traditionally used their sex lives as a status symbol. And we all know that's true. Okay? With other men. If you're a man who sleeps with a lot of women, then you're usually seen as a more successful man. Therefore, men have largely been conditioned to seek sex to fulfill their need for self esteem. And because men and women have traditionally pursued sex to fulfill different psychological needs, they fail to understand each other and then criticize each other for not meeting the needs that they want met. Men think that women are being clingy and manipulative, whereas women think that men are being insecure and desperate. So Dr. Mark says that in his book on dating for men, a core point that he makes is that men need to develop themselves independently of women to get their needs met on their own as much as possible. He said he would argue the same goes for women, but pursuing sex to compensate for your neediness and self-esteem, or because you feel a lack of connection in your life, will only cause you to behave in unattractive ways. He said, and that's just the end of the story. So now Dr. Mark says meeting your physiological needs. He talks about that when it comes to sex, and I'm moving that along. All right. And I think that was men and women. Okay, different needs. Okay, meeting your physiological needs. All right. So instead of mindless pursuing sex, Dr. Mark says that you can fulfill your psychological needs with a variety of sources in your life, like family and friends, to your career and personal growth. He said, but the problem is he found that most people who seek to fulfill their needs through sex do so because they don't have any healthy alternative sources in their lives. So they have just a little bit too much time on their hands, is what he was saying. He said, and this is where work comes in. He says, sex is fun, which it is, but it's not a good long-term solution for your self-esteem and a sense of well-being. Okay, he said, if you find yourself overly relying on sex to feel okay about yourself, then it's time to look for other outlets and spend more time with family members and friends who replenish your energy and make you a better person. He said, do activities that engage you and make you feel accomplished without the need for external validation. So I wanted to pause because I saw something recently, and I was just scrolling by, that was posted on Instagram, and so it's this young lady who's a rapper. I don't even know who she is, and I'm a musician, but I don't know who she is. She's very pretty. She kind of looks a little bit, put you in the mind of Cardi B, but it was not Cardi B. And the girl was rapping, and she had a crowd wherever she was, and then she just felt the need to just lift her blouse up and lift up her bra and show her boobs. And so I was like, wow. And so the statement that was made was that she was really feeling herself, or she was feeling confident. And from what I saw before she did that, with her rapping, she was really, really engaging the crowd, which means that she was very talented and good. And but for her to all of a sudden decide to just lift up her shirt and her bra and show her boobs, then that kind of in the eyes of of a person that's a little bit more mature, the question is she didn't have to, or the statement or the thought pattern is she didn't have to do that because she had already commanded the crowd with her talent. There was no need for her to flash herself and then expose herself in a sexual manner. But it is what it is. That lets you know where her mind is or what's going on. There's something going on with her to where she felt like she had to expose herself to get more acceptance. Okay, now back to what Dr. Mark was saying. Okay, back to what he was saying. He said, if you want to dive in at the deep end, start by asking questions. And this is, to maybe kind of get you, your mind centered or focused in another way. If you really, because some people really do just have a lot of sex on their mind. Okay. And it occupies their mind a lot, which becomes an addictive type of tendency. So he says, number one, these are some strategies. Do what you value. Do what you value. Number two, you are what you value. Number three, why some personal values are better than others. Number four, define your values and find yourself. Number five, reinvent yourself. And number six, live a good life. Okay, so these are some things, the strategies that Dr. Mark gave. If you feel like that you are just overly sexual, these are some things that can work on you. Hey, I don't know, I don't see any comments, I don't see anybody's name, so I can't really comment. Okay, so he said to ask yourself these thought-provoking questions. Here's one. Number one said, what is your favorite? I'm not asking these questions because Dr. Mark is a mess. Okay, I'm not going to ask that. Let's move this along. He said, something about social perspective. Okay, I'm not even going to talk about that. He said these deeply personal exercises will point the way to strategies best suited to meet your psychological needs. So I wanted to go back to the strategies again. Number one, he said, do what you value. Number two, you are what you value. Number three, why some personal values are better than others. Number four, defining your values and finding yourself. Number five, reinvent yourself. Number six, live the good life. All right. So once you're able to meet your psychological needs, then you can pursue sex from a place of power and abundance, attractive, and not from a place of neediness and desperation, which is unattractive. Okay. So he said men and women get caught up in their own needs and then project these needs onto everyone else around them. Women see men as cold and brutish because they expect them to have the same need for connection that they have. Men see women as manipulative and deceitful because they assume that women use sex as a tool for self esteem, like they do. In both cases, they are still wrong and mischaracterizing the people lying naked in front of them. Okay? And that could happen. So let's move this on. It says sex attachment and our psychological needs, and we're almost finished. Okay, sex attachment and our psychological needs. Here we go. Humans have evolved a psychological system of emotional attachments. So, totally involuntary yet universal, regardless of culture, age, or race, we get deeply and strongly emotionally attached to one another throughout our lives. And it actually starts with a child to its parents. And assuming that the parents, he said, didn't F it up, this is Dr. Mark. He said too much. That attachment then moves beyond our parents and onto some, he said some, not all, of our sexual partners. All right. So while sex is absolutely a psychological function, and in some ways it's no different than eating or going to the bathroom, he said evolution has intertwined our drive for sex. Example, a drive, not a need. So, with our psychological needs for esteem and connection, they're intimately linked in our ingrained systems, okay, of emotional attachment, and they cannot be unlinked. Even if one manages to suppress those needs, they come roaring back in the form of neediness and overcompensation. So he said, this is why even the most cold hearted player eventually has an emotional implosion, usually at the most unexpected time in his life. And that's why women want to be romanced and swept off their feet. He said it's why we keep on going on dates after frustrating date, okay, and with nothing to show for it. He said that's why overuse of pornography makes you feel like a loser, because while you're getting off, you're just reminding yourself that you're not good enough. Self-esteem and to be loved connection. So let's move on to this. Dr. Mark, then he says, sex, I hope y'all can see that. Sex is about emotional needs, psychological needs. So sex, again, is not like eating, because A, you don't die without it. And B, it's inevitably an emotional experience when you do have sex. So nature has cleverly wired us in this way to put our psychological needs first and then use sex to fulfill them in order to trick us into sticking around. He said, and taking care of one another. This man, Dr. Mark, is a mess. Okay. He says, sure, we may still try to get a little something, something on the side now again. And sure, when we break up and feel crappy, we may go on a little sex spree to feel good about ourselves. He said, but that's just it. It's not about the sex. It's about how we feel about ourselves. And that's the way nature made it, he said. And it's not changing anytime soon. So now I want to talk about, before I go, I want to talk about married to a sex addict. Is it the recovery versus the reality? Being married to a sex addict. I'm going to say this again. Being married to a sex addict. Okay. And this here, this is not Dr. Mark. This is Dr. Minwala. Dr. Minwala's teaching. Okay, so he starts out by asking some questions. Have your partner been cheating? Have your partner been watching porn, sexting, or visiting prostitutes? Dr. Minwala says that he understands how heartbreaking this is. He said maybe the person you're in a place where you don't want to get divorced, but you don't know if you can stay. Okay, he said he's guessing that you've offered grace upon grace upon grace and just want to know if your partner can really change. If you're married to a sex addict, he said, let's explore the difference between the recovery myth, the recovery myth being sold out, and the reality of what's required to restore a relationship. All right. So Dr. Minwala, he breaks this down to compulsive, abusive, sexual relational disorders. It's CASRD. Compulsive, abusive, sexual related disorder. And it should be up here. Let me see. Is it up there? Compulsive. It should be up there. All right. Compulsive. This is a clinical syndrome that involves two pathological systems: compulsive entitled sexuality and integrity abuse disorder. That's serious. Number one, compulsive entitled sexuality, and number two, integrity abuse disorder. So let's break down compulsive entitled sexuality. Let me open this up and make sure that y'all can see this. Okay. All right. This is where I'm at right now. Compulsive entitled sexuality. Okay. This refers to an inability or an unwillingness to control sexual urges or behavior, even when they cause significant negative consequences. So, again, compulsive entitled sexuality refers to an inability or an unwillingness to control sexual urges or behaviors, even when they cause significant negative consequences. All right, then integrity abuse disorder. This is expands the definition. This is an expansion of domestic abuse. Okay, so this is beyond the physical abuse. This is emotional, psychological, and relational abuse. So again, integrity abuse disorder. Integrity abuse disorder. And this again, this is a form of domestic abuse, but it's not in the physical form. It's an emotional, psychological, and a relational form of abuse. And there are a lot of people. I know a lot of people. Some of y'all have actually probably been in relationships with someone who has issues with integrity. This is what this is: integrity abuse disorder. Someone who just clearly functions in lack of integrity, and which is it's an abuse. It's a form of domestic abuse. It may not be physical, but it is emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and relational abuse. Okay? So it's chronic patterns of harm to any of the above or a period of time with a lack of viable escape. All right, so that's what that is. So Dr. Manwala, he says, I think I'm saying it right, Manwala. Dr. Manwala says that if you live with someone that's lying, who lies by mission, gaslighting, uh, denial, manipulation, secret life, partner blaming, stonewalling, partial disclosures, deceptive management, chronic diminishment, sexual rejection. He was like, okay, all of these play a part in these disorders that I just talked about earlier: compulsive, entitled sexuality, or integrity abuse disorder. He says that couples and individuals that are dealing with problematic sexual behaviors might typically hear the terms compulsive sexual behavior disorder, again, or sexual addiction, which is used to describe their experiences. But these words don't fully capture, he said, the holistic nature of what is actually going on in these situations. He said an exclusive focus on sexual behaviors is incomplete, and as problematic sexual behaviors are often accompanied by a tragic pattern of abuse and injury that deeply impacts partners and family members for years to come. For years to come. So Dr. Manwala, one of his theories that he came up with, and this is his theory conclusion: if you've ever had to deal with someone who has a sex disorder, or again an integrity disorder, he said, what is the right kind of help? This is Dr. Manwala. He said, honestly, it is hard to find what the right help is. Most therapists, he said, don't recognize abuse component, and therefore end up getting hurt. The partners still end up getting hurt even more. They're re-traumatized in the process of trying to get help. He said the best program in the country for these type of disorders is it's called Center for Peace. Center for Peace. Let me see if I know I wrote it down. Center for Peace. He said, which is a year-long program for the abusive men or the women who's experiencing this. That includes and their partner. It includes their partner at some point. He said, but hear him loud and clearly. This is Dr. Manwala. He said, hear him clear. He said, no couples counseling. He said, this is not a marriage issue or a communication problem. People with sex addictions. He said, it is not a marriage issue or a communication problem. He said, your spouse has an entitlement integrity problem. I'm going to say that again. It's not a couple's problem. Whoever is dealing with this situation, they have an entitlement integrity problem. An entitlement integrity problem. And he said, and you play no role in their behavior if you are in a relationship or married to someone with one of these sex disorder or an integrity disorder. All right, so let me give the takeaway, and then this is it. I'm going to see y'all in August 2020. The takeaway And this is from Dr. not Minwala, but Dr. Mark. He said that ditch the toxic relationship cycle. Just ditch it. Relationships can be complicated and difficult, but few people know that there are some pretty clear. He said a few people know that there are some pretty clear signals to know if a relationship is going to work or if it's not going to work. All right, so that is the takeaway. All right, guys, I was on a little bit longer tonight. We got it out the way. I did the takeaway. I'm going to see y'all. Let me open this up for my fellow theorists or someone who may want to know where I got my findings, my theory from. These are the website references right here. You can check it for yourself. And it's fine. I'm used to people checking the teachings and the theories, which you should do. And so you can kind of understand it for your own, from your own perception. All right. Okay. There's a past Counsel of the Day with Shanrae series that you've missed or just want to rewatch, you can go to my YouTube channel at Shanrae Price. Please like, share, and subscribe, and then select any past series that you would like to watch. All right. And I am a professional one-on-one counselor. So if you are interested in professional one-on-one counseling services, feel free to contact me via my Facebook Messenger at Shanrae Cherie Price, or you can email me at shanraecherieprice@gmail.com. I'm a lifestyle strategist, and my aim is to aid you in your overall life goals and your life dreams. Okay, guys, thank you for participating this quarter, the month of May 2022, with Counsel Today with Shanrae. I will be back in August. I'm going to be back August 2022 for the month of August. It's going to be a different topic with different subtopics under it. Always on Tuesdays and Thursdays nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The time slot normally is 30 minutes, but sometimes it'll run a little bit longer. So listen, I want to say thank you again. This has been a wonderful month, wonderful topic. Enjoy your summer. I will see y'all August 2022. Have a wonderful summer and be good to yourself. And like I said, I believe that everybody can overcome whatever situation, traumatic situation that they may have experienced in their life and still may be suffering from it. I believe everyone can overcome. There's a strategy that will work for you. All right. So I will see you August 2022 for the whole month of August for another Counsel of the Day with Shanrae, my third quarter. All right. So glad to see y'all again. Good night. Have a wonderful summer. Bye.